Coming up on this edition of SPSI, we have Councilman Andy King to discuss what's going on with the special needs community, empowerment, youth, and also we're talking about NAMI as well as health disparities in New York City. All that and much more when SPSI starts right now.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome to this edition of SPSI, the one and only program that focuses on the needs, concerns, and achievements of the differently able for the past 17 years. I've always been your host, Lawrence Seiler. On this edition of SPSI, we talk to Councilman Andy King to discuss what's going on with the 12th District of the Bronx. Plus, we take a look at a recent event. The SPSI was at the 2014 NAMI Walk. Now, I would like to welcome Councilman King to Special People, Special Issues.
A pleasure, and thank you for having me this afternoon.
Okay. Councilman King, when we talk about empowerment and people with special needs, what exactly do we mean?
Well, we're talking about allowing individuals who may be intellectually challenged or even physically having some challenges, being able to be productive members of society. And how do we do that? We do that as we do with everyone. You know, as I say, from UPK to Mama K, that you're able to have education, able to have love, and able to have opportunities to help you develop and be the best you can be as an adult.
Tell me some of the things that you're doing about empowerment within within the 12th District of the Bronx.
Well, one of the things that people are afraid to have conversations, and I alluded to it earlier, is about education. And in the 12th District, I recently sat down with my principals throughout the whole school community to figure out what's the best way to make sure that every child who attends, whether it's early childhood learning centers or whether it's the educational school system, of how do we make sure that we have a learning environment that's able to teach, provide love, provide nurturing, and also being able to allow them to educate themselves. That's the number one priority for a person to become a productive adult, is the early years to be developed correctly. Now, we want to make sure that our school environments are set up in such a way that every person, whether the academic levels, that they're able to get serviced by the adults who show up each and every day. So what does that additionally mean? That means that the school buildings need to be set up in a way that everyone can learn. The classrooms must be having their one-to-ones for every student who may be intellectually challenged or not intellectually challenged. But we need to make sure that the environments are not disruptive to those who need a little bit more attention than those who require more attention.
Mm-hmm. Okay, when we talk about education, the Supreme Court just recently dealt with a hard blow with getting rid of certain words that shouldn't be used, like the word retarded, because they passed a law, I think it was last week.
Right.
Can you explain a little bit about that and how it deals with, because there's certain words that people shouldn't use,
right,
when it comes to people that are challenged.
Right. And kids are cruel. I'll put it to you, I'll start from there. And words do hurt. You know, you grow up with sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. But you know what? That's really inaccurate, because you can really destroy a person with just the words that come out of your mouth. And I think when they did away with the term retard, I think that's something that it was a stigma that was not something of someone who was going through a challenge, but it was just a form of saying, how do we demoralize a person by labeling them and calling them a term that everyone else just thought it was offensive. So I'm grateful and thankful for the Supreme Court and making sure that adults and everyone, everyone use proper terms when we refer to individuals who may have different challenges or disabilities.
Okay. Now, when we talk youth empowerment, you've been dealing with employment and people with special needs. Now, because recently you dealt with the Summer Youth Employment Program, which I'm a former member of.
Okay.
Explain a little bit about your initiatives there.
Well, the Summer Youth Employment Program, you and I have both experienced it. I appreciated when I was 14-year-old. I was a summer camp counselor under the SYEP program.
So was I.
Yeah.
So was I.
I think that was one of the early stages of life that taught me discipline and helped me learn how to manage money, and it allowed me to be responsible with getting up, and being held accountable for taking care of someone else, and that's what the little children that were in the camp. But what has happened over the last couple of years, as we were talking about last year, is that over 137,000 youth across the city of New York applied for summer youth employment, but approximately about 37,000 were only hired. Now, that number is not a great number.
No, it's not.
It's not a great number at all. This year, because of the raise in minimum wage, the mayor added an additional $8.5 million to make sure that that the level of hiring stay at the same level. But again, I say that's still unacceptable because you're still talking about 3 out of 10 children who apply, youth who apply, will get hired. Mm-hmm. Now, I've always said, unless you play in baseball where 3 out of 10 is good because you're batting 300, it's still a failure rate, to have only 3 out of 10 children being hired. So I'm urging the administration, I'm urging DYCD, I'm urging everyone who has a vested stake in making sure that our children are productive and have a wonderful summer, and our families are not having to worry about where the children are. And when children don't have anything to do, other bad behaviors kind of creep in, or the streets can grab you and take a hold. So we need to make sure that we hire more children and we put the funding in. It's about developing people, and people keep forgetting that children, as I used to see a long time, kids are people too. And we kind of forget till they get to a certain age, then we want to acknowledge that they're on the planet. But this administration has taken on the charge and said, hey, we're going to pay attention to our children by funding more UPK program slots, by also investing more money in after-school programs. So we need to make sure that when it comes to summer youth, that we do the same thing and invest the money, that we can increase the number, that we at least at a minimum, hire at least half of the young people who apply, that they get hired.
Okay, when we talk about, since we're talking about employment, the ADA, right, Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990 says that a person with special needs is supposed to get hired and, have accommodations at the job to help him or her. What is your, I believe that the ADA should change in certain ways. What is your take on that?
Well, I think when it comes to our individuals who are in the workforce or trying to get in the workforce that may have any disabilities, yes, the environment should be conducive to allow them to work just like anyone else. And we have to be very sensitive to everyone's needs, because we're all not the same, but we're all the same because we're all part of the human race. And whatever we can do as electeds, whatever we can do as churches, and we can do as organizations, but more importantly, whatever we can do as people, we should do to help our fellow brother and sister.
Can you explain to me also in terms of the, youth empowerment? Because, youth who need to be mentored, and stuff like that. Can you explain a little bit about mentorship and how important it is for youth?
Well, it goes back to it takes a village to raise a child. And I am one, I started the Bronx Youth Empowerment Programs 8 years ago when I saw a need that some of our teens were just out lost with no direction. How do we get our community stronger? But the only way you get your community stronger if you have the next generation ready to involve themselves and jump in to take over. So I started this with the mantra of thinking of how do we improve participation with our young people. I've always said, and you always will continue to hear me say, that people pay attention to people who participate. I say it over and over again. People pay attention to people who are participating. So we need to make sure that our young people participate, to empower them on how community boards work, how their school systems work, how they can help their fellow brother and fellow sisters, how to deal with the seniors in the community, how to deal with people who are a little different than themselves, and being sensitive to everyone's needs and everyone's challenges, because none of us are perfect. So in order to empower us, we need to make sure we educate ourselves with the knowledge that allows us to empower ourselves, give ourselves opportunities so we can take care of our families, whether it's economic opportunities. But this is how we do. We need to make sure that we develop ourselves. And if we empower ourselves with information and knowledge, sky's the limit for us all.
So what are some of the misconceptions around people with special needs when they first meet them?
Well, people think that people with special needs might be Martians. If I can say it jokingly, they think they're from another planet. And that's where it comes early on in life. If you've never been around anyone who has dealt with someone with special needs, then you are not as sensitive, or sometimes as young children get frightened, because how many times do parents sit down and say, hey, unless your sister or brother may have cerebral palsy or just have or is autistic or have speech impediment, you might not come into contact with someone until you walk into a school setting. And then now, what does a 5-year-old do with that? What does a 7-year-old do with that if they've never ever had that conversation?
Excuse me while we go to break. When we come back, we'll have more with Councilman King, and we'll talk about NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. All that and much more when we return in a moment. Stay tuned.
Hands can do incredible things. Now they can even help save a life with hands-only CPR. If you see an adult suddenly collapse, just call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Learn more at handsonlycpr.org.
This was me. And Mom and Dad. And my big brother Alex. And Jack. This was the day that I learned that sandals get their name from sand, and that the ocean is bigger than all of us. This was the day we all got to forget that I was sick. This was my wish.
G-Morning, sunshine. Wakey, wakey. Text me. Are your parents home later? We can hang. LUV, love you. JK. Holla back. Holla back. Holla back. Are you with your friends? That's lame. We're in a huge fight right now. XO. What'd you dream about? Something I did. Are you on your way to the mall? I'm lonely. Nude pics. Send me some. Text me.
Welcome home, man.
I'm lucky. Let me help you with that. I get to do something I love. It has nothing to do with touchdowns or titles. Everybody bring it in. I get to play a part in the life of someone just starting out. How many of you think homework is just as important as teamwork? I help keep kids in school. Good. And that's the name of the game. My name is LaDainian Thomason. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United.
Okay, recently we were talking about empowerment and people with special needs. Recently, SPSI was out and about at the 2014 NAMI Walk. NAMI stands for the National Alliance for Mental Illness. The NAMI Walk is an event that brings people together for different reasons and from different walks of life to empower each other. Let's take a look at this. With spring and summer approaching, recently NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness, NAMI for short, held their 2014 Walk and Marathon at South Street Seaport. there was a lot of support from volunteers and community organizations lending a hand.
We've been around for over 30 years, and our mission is to include the voice of the person with mental illness and their family in treatment, to expand access to quality mental health services, and to eradicate the stigma of mental illness.
And today we're here walking to eliminate the stigma of mental illness, raise awareness, get people involved so that they know that they're not alone in this suffering.
Reporting from South Street Seaport, Lawrence Seiler, BronxNet Television. So I understand that you were at the NAMI Walk at one time. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, understanding, all our brothers and sisters and supporting everyone in every walks in life. Myself, along with the Bronx Youth Empowerment Program, one of our community outreach to empower young people and help them be a little bit more sensitive to understanding the challenges of human beings across the globe, that we embraced NAMI, and we braved the elements and went out one summer morning, and it started raining. We was out there and we took the NAMI walk, and we walked through Side Street Creek, down Manhattan, crossed the Brooklyn Bridge, and brought it back home. And it was a wonderful experience, and I look forward to doing it again and doing all I can to help my brothers and sisters.
Two main questions I want to ask you. Recently you were at the Special Olympics, in years past, and the Bronx has its own Special Olympics. Can you explain about your involvement with that?
Well, that's a couple of years back, I was actually the New York City programming director for this New York City Special Olympics, and what allowed me to give my, what experience I had in sports to individuals who wanted to participate in sports under the Special Olympics banner. So I was grateful, and it was a real honor to be their Grand Marshal this year at 2014 as a council member to come back, to lead in the athletes in the march in Mount St. Michael High School, and just watch the participants exercise, and run relays, and shot put, and just participate in all the athletic activities. So my commitment is there for everyone in the 12th and all across New York, and whatever I can do, because I say we all are great people. Some of us have a little bit more challenges than others, but we all have our challenges, and it's a matter of how do we come together and make sure that we move forward as a people.
All right. Talking about challenges, and this is a big question, health disparities in New York City. Mm-hmm. When you're dealing with lack of nurses, lack of doctors, lack of medicine, etc., etc., etc. Can you explain how do we change those health disparities? Because I understand that you were part of 1199.
Yes, I was community organizer for the Healthcare Education Project of 1199, which my job was to educate the community on health disparities and advocating and fighting for funding for the healthcare system here in New York, whether it was fighting for funding for nursing homes, for hospitals, and making sure that workers like CNAs and nurses and techs and dietitians, that everyone still had a place to work, because the Bronx is one of the leaders in when it comes to employment is the healthcare field. And if healthcare system like Monty was to close down, about 80% of people would be out of work in the Bronx. But the disparities that happen in healthcare, it's usually based on color lines, usually based on economics, and we always wanted to fight to make sure that we had the proper health system in place. We always fought to make sure that we advocate to make sure we had the proper foods, because the parts of the Bronx are food deserts where you can't get healthy foods, but you can go in more affluent neighborhoods and can find...
There's fast food restaurants everywhere you go.
Right. From the fast food and the bodega. I'm not knocking entrepreneurship, but we need to make sure that we put foods in that help us. You mentioned about all the problems that we could have, lack of doctors and lack of nurses, but how do you stay healthy? Well, you can stay healthy by putting the right things in your body. Healthcare means also wellness. That means provide good, strong mental health for yourself, read, think, and think good about yourself, think positive, eat the right foods, exercise, treat your brother and sisters with love, and all that comes back to you, and I think if people take ownership of their bodies and do the right thing by themselves, by the things they put in and not put in, I think, a lot of the healthcare disparities can and will go away. But we still have a responsibility to make sure that the powers that be that when we do need the healthcare system, provide the best adequate healthcare system for everyone, not just those who the haves and the have-not. As we say, healthcare is not a privilege; it's a right.
In terms of youth empowerment as a whole, what is the main message that we want to portray here for our youth today, especially if a person who is a youth and a person with special needs?
I'm asking all our youth to empower themselves, and when you empower yourself, you get an opportunity to build your mind, and in turn you build your body, and always you'll build your community. That's the message, building mind, body, and community. If we do that, we all will be empowered to be better communities and better people.
So what are your future goals as councilman helping our youth today and people with special needs? What is your main initiative here?
My main initiative, is I go back to education. We have to educate ourselves. And I'm working closely with the schools to make sure that we have a system that allows everyone a fair chance at being educated, a fair chance at opportunities, and a fair chance to grow up and be productive citizens.
For those who are just tuning in, before you were a councilman, what was your goals as far as youth empowerment?
My goals was to make sure that young people learned and able to participate. As I say, people pay attention to people who participate. We need people to be active in our neighborhoods. We need people to be sensitive in our neighborhoods. We need people not to commit crimes. We need people to respect the police. We need people to have jobs. We need people to respect our seniors. And we need our people just to be loving people. And that's been my goal all along. As before I was elected to unite the 12th district, now as a council member, my job is to put us all on the same page and make sure that the adults are doing right by educating their children right, so then that our children can behave correctly. Because, there's no one time I'm going to want to sit back and go fishing and relax, and you're going to do the same thing, and we need to make sure that the world's all right. But it's only all right if we have a harmonious zone with our children who emulate everything that we do as adults.
And last question, in terms of because I know certain programs with youth have been cut due to lack of budget.
Right.
What is one way that we can work together to not make that happen as far as programs for people with special needs?
There's a term: the squeaky wheel gets the oil. Well, what needs to happen at times? I applaud the mayor for putting more funding into after-school programs for youth. But I don't want to always have the conversation of separating people with special needs, because they are a part of our community. But if there ever comes a place that we have a time that we have to invest more time and energy in an individual such as, then that community has a responsibility, as a senior has this responsibility, to write letters, advocate to us, or those advocates on their behalf, to bring awareness to some of the challenges that whole community may be having, so we can make sure that we put the funding in. And I say this, and I end with this: when there isn't funding, and that goes around the whole gamut, I always want to say lack of funding doesn't mean lack of service. People can volunteer time. They can still put energy to help them, because someone did it for us when we were coming up. And every time if you're expecting to get paid $1 to deliver on service, you will never be the best that you can be. Service comes from the heart, and that's why I'm asking everyone: pick up something, a book, a cause, or anything to help your friend and your neighbor, or challenges, special needs, or anybody.
Well, Councilman, I would like to thank you for being a guest on Special People
My
Special
honor.
Issues.
A pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
When we come back, we'll have the SPSI bulletin board when we return in a moment. Stay tuned.
I'm lucky. Let me help you with that. I get to do something I love. It has nothing to do with touchdowns or titles. Everybody bring it in. I get to play a part in the life of someone just starting out. How many of you think homework is just as important as teamwork? I help keep kids in school. Good. And that's the name of the game. My name is LaDania Thomason. I don't just wear the shirt, I live it.
Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United.
G-morning, sunshine. Wakey, wakey. Text me. Are your parents home later? We can hang. LUV, love you. JK. Holla back. Holla back. Holla back.
Are you with your friends? That's lame.
We're in a huge fight right now. XO. What'd you dream about? Something I did. Are you on your way to the
I'm
mall?
lonely.
Nude pics. Send me some. Text me.
Welcome home, man.
Hands can do incredible things. Now they can even help save a life with hands-only CPR. If you see an adult suddenly collapse, just call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Learn more at handsonlycpr.org.
This was me. And Mom and Dad. And my big brother Alex. And Jack. This was the day that I learned that sandals get their name from sand. And that the ocean is bigger than all of us. This was the day we all got to forget that I was sick. This was my wish.
Long before I was in Hollywood, I had a grandmother by the name of Estelle Marie Taylor, positive role models to make sure that I was on the straight path. Big Brothers Big Sisters carefully screens volunteers and places them in long-term mentoring matches with kids who face adversity. With more volunteers, especially men, and more donations, every little who needs a big can have it. Start something. If it's been a while since you've been involved, start something again. Learn more at bigbrothersbigsisters.org.
If I got to go to college, oh my goodness. I like discovering new things. You get to see what works for you and what doesn't. That helps you evolve as a person. You get to make like a supernova of skill or talent or whatever it is. I've always wanted to go to college. I just feel like that's my destiny. My name is Queen, and I am your dividend.
Now let's take a look at the SPSI bulletin board. It contains numbers and information based on today's program. For more information on Andy King and his work, Andy King, Councilman Andy King, New York City Council Member, 12th District, 940 East Gun Hill Road, Bronx, New York, 10469. Telephone number 718-684-5509. That number once again is 718-684-5509. Their fax number 718-684-5510. 718-684-5510. And the website is andy.king@council.newyorkcity.gov. That's andy.king@council.newyorkcity.gov. Well, that wraps up this edition of Special People, Special Issues. As always, I'm Lawrence Seiler. See you next time.